The whispers in room 237, Jack Torrance's fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. The cursor blinked on the empty document, a stark reminder of his failure. 6 months. 6 goddamn months since his last story, and nothing but rejections and pitying looks from his agent. He ran a hand through his unkempt hair, feeling the greasy strands between his fingers. When was the last time he'd showered? The days blurred together in a haze of writer's block and bottom-shelf whiskey. His agent's words echoed in his mind. Get away, clear your head, find your muse again. Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one staring down eviction notices and dwindling bank accounts. That's how he found himself white-knuckling the steering wheel of his beat-up Corolla, driving up the winding mountain road to the Overlook Hotel. The brochure had promised solitude and inspiration. Jack just hoped it would deliver salvation. As he pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, the imposing structure loomed against the twilight sky. Jack squinted, his bloodshot eyes playing tricks on him. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw faces pressed against the darkened windows, watching him. He blinked, and they were gone. The lobby assaulted his senses, the overpowering scent of lemon polish barely masking a musty underlayer, the oppressive silence broken only by the tick-tock of an ancient grandfather clock. Jack approached the reception desk, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud on the marble floor. A young woman with a name tag reading Wendy greeted him, her smile as plastic as her name tag. Welcome to the Overlook, Mr. Torrance. How long will you be staying with us? A week, maybe 2, Jack replied, his voice raspy from disuse. He cleared his throat. I'm a writer. Need some peace and quiet to work on my next book. The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. Next book. As if the first one hadn't been a fluke, a one-hit wonder that left him grasping at literary straws. Wendy's smile flickered, a crack in her professional veneer. Of course. Let me just check our availability. Her fingers clacked on the keyboard, the sound setting Jack's teeth on edge. It seems we only have one room available at the moment, room 237. A shadow passed over Wendy's face, there and gone so quickly Jack thought he might have imagined it. But a coil of unease tightened in his gut. Is there a problem with that room? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Oh, no, not at all, Wendy said, the words tumbling out too quickly. It's just, well, it's one of our older rooms, but it has a lovely view of the mountains. Jack's eyes narrowed. He'd always had a knack for sniffing out a story, and every instinct told him there was more to room 237 than Wendy was letting on. But beggars can't be choosers, and right now, Jack was scraping the bottom of the barrel. Sounds perfect, he said, forcing a smile. As Wendy handed him the key, an actual metal key, not a modern key card, her hand trembled slightly. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Torrance, and if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call the front desk. Was that concern in her eyes? Or pity? The elevator's asthmatic wheezing did nothing to calm Jack's frayed nerves as it lurched its way to the second floor. He dragged his battered suitcase down the long, carpeted hallway, the floral pattern faded and worn beneath his feet. Room 237 waited at the very end, isolated from the other guest rooms like a leprous exile. The lock turned with a heavy click that resonated in Jack's bones. He pushed open the door, wincing at the ominous creak of hinges. The room beyond was spacious, if oppressively musty. Heavy curtains framed a large window overlooking the craggy peaks and dense forests, now cloaked in encroaching darkness. A whisper, so faint he thought he might have imagined it. Jack sat up in bed, heart pounding, straining to listen. There it was again, a susurration just on the edge of hearing, like someone breathing words into his ear. Hello? He called out, hating the tremor in his voice. Silence answered him, heavy and expectant. Jack stumbled out of bed, checking the hallway with shaking hands. Empty. He inspected every corner of the room, finding nothing out of place. Shaking his head, he climbed back into bed. Just the wind, he muttered. Or pipes settling. Get it together, Torrance. But sleep eluded him, and when he finally drifted off, his dreams were a nightmare parade of shadowy figures and half-heard voices, all demanding something just beyond his comprehension. The next day, fatigue dogged his steps. The words that had flowed so freely now stuttered and died on the page. Jack's mind felt foggy, disjointed. As night fell once more, dread pooled in his stomach like lead. He considered asking for a different room, but pride stopped him. He was here to write a horror novel, for Christ's sake. A few strange noises shouldn't rattle him. That night, the whispers came again, louder and more insistent. Jack couldn't make out words, but the tone was urgent, pleading. He buried his head under the pillow, but it did nothing to muffle the sound. If anything, it seemed to bring the voices closer, as if they were inside his own skull. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted. Jack's breath frosted in the air, tiny ice crystals forming with each panicked exhalation. The whispers crescendoed to a fever pitch, a cacophony of desperate voices clamoring for attention. And then, silence, absolute and oppressive. Jack lay there, heart thundering against his ribcage, until dawn's weak light filtered through the curtains. As he stumbled to the bathroom, his reflection stopped him cold. Dark circles ringed his bloodshot eyes, and was it his imagination? Or had new lines etched themselves into his face overnight? He splashed water on his face, the icy shock bringing momentary clarity. This couldn't go on. He needed answers, needed to know the truth about room 237, whatever the cost to his pride or sanity. At the front desk, Wendy's cheerful facade crumbled under Jack's determined questioning. I shouldn't say anything, she stammered, eyes darting nervously to a door marked management. They don't like us to talk about it. Please, Jack pressed, desperation lending steel to his voice. I need to know. Wendy glanced around, then leaned in close. The scent of her shampoo, something floral and sweet, was a jarring note of normalcy in Jack's increasingly fractured world. Room 237 has a history, she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. Suicides, disappearances. People check in, but they don't always check out, if you know what I mean. We've had guests complain about strange noises, cold spots, even apparitions. The room's been renovated, blessed, exorcised, nothing helps. Jack's mind reeled, pieces of a terrifying puzzle clicking into place. Why don't you close it off? Wendy shrugged helplessly. Money. The hotel's struggling. We need every room, even the problematic ones. Armed with this knowledge, Jack returned to the room that now felt more like a prison cell. Part of him, the rational part that still clung to sanity, screamed to flee, to put the Overlook in his rearview mirror and never look back. But a larger part, the writer in him, or was it something darker, something that had awakened in this godforsaken place? I was intrigued. This was the story he had come here to find, served up on a silver platter of supernatural horror. He spent the day researching the hotel's history, uncovering a litany of tragedies tied to room 237. A jealous husband who murdered his wife and then himself in 1912, their screams echoing through the halls. A depressed heiress who overdosed in 1948, her body discovered days later by a horrified maid. A honeymooning couple who vanished without a trace in 1975, leaving behind only rumpled sheets and uneaten room service. As night fell once more, Jack steeled himself for what was to come. He set up cameras, audio recorders, anything that might capture evidence of the paranormal. His hands shook as he downed a minibar bottle of whiskey, liquid courage burning a path to his roiling stomach. Then he waited. The whispers began earlier this time, swirling around him like smoke. Jack forced himself to remain calm, to listen. Slowly, maddeningly, he began to distinguish words. Help us. Trapped. Escape. As night fell once more, Jack steeled himself for what was to come. He set up cameras, audio recorders, anything that might capture evidence of the paranormal. His hands shook as he downed a minibar bottle of whiskey, liquid courage burning a path to his roiling stomach. Then he waited. The whispers began earlier this time, swirling around him like smoke. Jack forced himself to remain calm, to listen. Slowly, maddeningly, he began to distinguish words. Help us. Trapped. Escape. The temperature dropped, Jack's breath misting in the air. Frost patterns etched themselves across the window, forming and dissolving in hypnotic patterns. And then, in the mirror above the desk, he saw them. Faces, dozens of them, superimposed on his reflection. Men, women, young, old, all wearing expressions of terror and anguish that would haunt Jack's dreams for years to come. Their mouths moved in sync with the whispers, pleading for release. Jack stumbled back, knocking over his chair with a crash that seemed to come from a million miles away. The faces began to push through the mirror, the glass rippling like water. Hands reached for him, insubstantial yet terrifyingly real. In that moment, Jack understood. Room 237 wasn't just haunted. It was a trap, a supernatural snare that had claimed countless victims over the decades. And now, it wanted him. Wanted his fear, his sanity, his very soul. The realization broke whatever spell had been clouding his mind. Jack snatched up his laptop, the only thing that mattered now, and ran. He didn't stop until he reached his car, lungs burning and legs trembling. As he peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing in protest, Jack glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw faces pressed against the window of room 237, watching him drive away with a mixture of envy and relief. Then the Overlook disappeared around a bend, taking its secrets with it. As he peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing in protest, Jack glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, he thought he saw faces pressed against the window of room 237, watching him drive away with a mixture of envy and relief. Then the Overlook disappeared around a bend, taking its secrets with it. 3 months later, Jack's novel, The Whispers in Room 237, topped the bestseller lists. Critics praised its chilling authenticity, the way it blurred the line between fiction and reality. Readers devoured the tale of a writer's descent into madness, debating endlessly whether the horrors were supernatural or psychological. If only they knew. Jack should have felt elated, vindicated. This was everything he dreamed of: fame, fortune, literary acclaim. But as he sat in his plush New York apartment, staring at the blank document on his computer screen, a familiar dread settled over him. The cursor blinked, an accusatory metronome. And somewhere, just on the edge of hearing, a whisper began.